So I wanted to use Deno and some other new technologies. The problem is they all come a la carte. So I'm trying to create a template for myself and others. You can jump right in here and use nothing but TypeScript. You have full IDE features. And the trickiest part, for some reason, was using shared library files. That's actually one of the reasons I really like Deno, because you can write some of the same code in the client or the server, but it's surprisingly hard to write that code in one place and then share it between both places. Let's take a look and see how it works. You can see I had to split this into two pieces. There's the Deno part and the everything else part. I originally tried making one workspace to put everything together. Unfortunately, there's a few bugs, and the Deno people are aware of them. Right now, if you try to run both of these together, Intellisense gets very confused. I have one project for Deno and one project for everything else. Let's start on the Deno side. Deno has a run button, and this will provide the files to us. All the client files, of course, run in the browser. As always, it pauses on the first line just to give you a chance to get the debugger running. We'll take a closer look at the debugger in a moment. And some things to notice, a nice little copyright string. We'll get back to that. And we're running locally. This could run just as well on a real server. And by the way, first thing to notice, the same copyright string. Obviously there's bigger problems. This is just a sample. But at the same time, updating that string everywhere because there's different bits of software, it's just kind of a pain sometimes. So this is just an example of something that we'll want to put in a library. In fact, I'll show you in a moment where that is in the library. But this is client server, so we need to send something to the server. In fact, let me prove that it's client server. And let's look at our network tab just so we can see what's happening. So, what is my name? And you can tell that it's encrypted because you can't read it. Ah, and this popped up. I guess I had a breakpoint set. I forgot about that. And sure enough, we're in one of our library files. We received this string. We saw that just a second ago. That was down here. This highly encrypted, super safe, triple ROT13 encrypted string. And again, this is the library file, which is going to unencrypt it. And for this time, I'm just going to hit run, just so we can see some results. In fact, let me turn that off. We'll get back to this. Yeah, that was a little bit discontinuous. Let's try this again. Philip, 1, 2, 3, go. And you notice this copyright string came from the server, and this one came from the client. We'll take a look at that code. And you notice there was another request sent with a different string and, well, not the best encryption, but we'll take another look at that. So we saw the debugger on the server side briefly. Let's take a look on the client side here. Let's say sources, and maybe make a little bit of room. It's smart enough to find the source maps that come with each of the JavaScript files. That's my biggest concern. We can do something different if we're going to do a customer release, but for right now, I want to make this really easy to debug. And you notice that I have two different directories here. This is TypeScript, so obviously the code that goes behind the main page here, and a separate module, because if you can't have shared library code, there's something wrong with your development environment. Alright, so here we have client Misc. This is some library code that will be used by a lot of different clients. This thing, it just grabs an element from the HTML and it checks the type for you. But this is the more important part. These are the libraries that we are using on both the client and the server. And as you can see, we got the copyright string, and we have, well, this is a fairly simple library here for encrypting stuff. Don't worry, we have another library which makes it much more secure. We're going to run this 3 times in a row. Okay, sounds a little silly, but when I first started, it was easy to make one level of library, but to have libraries calling other libraries, that's where I got into trouble. So that's why this template actually has 2 separate levels of libraries. Alright, well, let's take a look. What is your name? Philip? And, well, we're going to call rot13 on that. Step into. Step out of. Now we're going to call it a second time. And then a third time, because we really want to do a good job of this. And what's next? Here we are. Now let's see that exact same code on the server side. We were here a second ago, but run. And again, the bugger pops up because it's ready. And it received that string, and the exact same way I can say step into, see string, do not edit. Sure enough, we need to call rot13 a second time. And then a third time. Okay, I said stuff was easy to change. Let's take a closer look. Let's say that I change this, well, copyright string. Good as anything. And I'm going to go to the everything else library. This is the master. These files actually exist in both places. Here, visible to web, obviously some hard-coded stuff, plus what we're just looking at, the TypeScript that's behind the HTML. But let's go into this shared area and let's go into useful stuff. And let's change the copyright string to be something different. I don't know if that means something. I don't really speak emoji. I just like it to be very obvious, so when we hit refresh, you'll see what's going on. I hit save, and that's all I have to do. Now I'm going to go into the client here, and I'm going to hit refresh. And you want to watch down here where the copyright string gets printed. And it's blank for a moment. It filled in the HTML first, and you saw this area was blank too because the JavaScript wasn't ready. It was automatically recompiling from the TypeScript. There's different tools for this, but again, they all came in pieces and none of them worked together exactly the way I wanted. If I hit refresh again, it'll be faster because it's cached. And let's try this. We don't need that anymore. And we don't need that anymore. Sorry, I should have done that a little bit cleaner. Let's try this again. And the server hasn't changed. You need to restart the server if you want the server to see changes. The client stuff, every time you go grab it from the web server, we automatically check if it needs to be refreshed, but the server gets killed only when you want to restart it. So let's take care of that. And let's start on the Deno side for a second. You see we have some of the same files, this high security and this useful stuff, and oh my goodness, a README file. You don't need that, you're listening to the video. You notice I had to copy stuff into here. Unfortunately, I was not able to just reuse it exactly as is. If you read the documentation, it really comes down to this. If you look at high security in the other version, so this is high security in the client, and we had to write .js when we're importing from useful stuff. Here. Let me scroll that up just no, it won't let me scroll. Yes. So now you can see the only difference is, well, the comments that say do not edit this and that file extension. You can learn more about that in my README file. Well, let's just do this. Let's go into the everything else, because this is the master, and let's go to useful stuff. And let's change this to something else. And we still have to save. In one case we hit refresh in the browser, and in the other case we're going to be hitting buttons in a different copy of Visual Studio Code, and that's the reason why. And all I have to do, just the normal things, I'm going to say stop, and then I'm going to say launch. This was it copying all the files, making sure that they were correct and up to date. And again, it always pauses on that first line. It just sets a breakpoint. And now let's take a look. I haven't stopped this. This doesn't automatically change. This is the client. So I'm going to say, not very creative anymore. So here we have Phil was here and the date without anything. And we're expecting this to have a Roman numeral 2 and this to have, I believe, a hot dog. But you know, it worked. Of course, if I wanted this, I just have to hit refresh in my browser. That's a separate thing. And once again, a brief pause. There's probably a way to change that, just a way to force it to run the compiler a little bit sooner. Again, the major requirements. We wanted to use Deno and TypeScript on the server side. The main way the server talks to the client is HTTP. Server can do anything at once, but that's what we're focused on. TypeScript for the client. Shared modules. That was like one of the hardest things, maybe just because it was the last piece of the puzzle. And then the IDE needs to be smart. I didn't show that part off. Let me show something. We have these files called library tests, just to show this off. So where are we right now? We're in the TypeScript stuff that talks to directly to the client. It's not the shared part, it's the client only part. And what do I have here? I can create an element if I want to. I can create the alert window, but I cannot call Deno readlink. This was one of the most frustrating things when I got started. I got bits and pieces of it working, but you know, if Intellisense is wrong, and if it's telling you, hey, this can't work when you're on the Deno side, well, that's going to be a problem. that's worse than having nothing at all. So again, this one knew that Deno was off limits, but everything else was okay. And then down here I have another library test. And basically none of these worked because these were both specific to one place or the other. Now, I thought alert might work in both places, but it doesn't, and I'm not especially worried because I just don't see that as very important right now. And let's look for the third one. So here we have library test, and again this is on the server side. This is in Deno. And of course the Deno part works. This works on both sides. Alright, so we're on the Deno side, so sure enough we can use this stuff, and it's giving you so much information. Try turning off Intellisense for a moment. Try using Notepad and see how long you last. This I had to disable. So just like before, it knows where I am. It knows what environment I'm in. And I use a tsconfig file to do this for the everything else project. The Deno stuff you have no control. You have to accept the Deno part. Again, there's so many details here, and for the most part I'm going to say that it's happening for you automatically, so you don't have to worry about it. So I showed you this part before. You can read it if you want to know more. Basically, there were a whole lot of problems and a whole lot of things that I tried before I finally got it to work right. Modules, like I said, this was the hard part, but how do you create a big project if you can't have modules? Like to do things a little bit better, but they're pretty good right now. The editor, it would be nice if we just had one editor instead of two down here, but it works. The debugger, as I showed you, works really well, and that was one of my huge priorities. You can't develop serious software if you don't have the debugger. The build process, as you saw, it's pretty much automated. As soon as you need the file, it checks if it's out of date. Think about it. You're going to have this server anyway, because the server is going to be doing some smart things. It's actually going to be computing some things, and it's going to be returning some totally dynamic content. But it's also going to be shipping you off stuff that runs in your browser and stuff that it's mostly just copying as is. So why not just add the compile step into there? The server build process, you saw most of it. There's a few odds and ends that you need to take care of if you're using this. And these are the tools that I'm using. Deno, incredibly easy to install. VS Code, point you to the right place along with the 2 extensions that you'll need. Git, you pretty much want to install that for yourself, and Git bash, and this points to the right place, of course. And TSC, so there is a version of TSC that's built into Deno, and I tried using it and there were various issues, and it's a very unstable API right now. I talked with the developers, they were changing things as I was using them, and they told me they're just not done yet. So this worked better, just calling TSC separately. And there's more that I would like. That's the best part of this thing. It's a nice project where people can keep fixing it and adding to it. And if I get stuck, maybe someone can show me. The 2 spaces is just one of the craziest things. I don't want to spend a lot of time on it, but I do have this set up. It's not working. And this was another thing that there's just so many pieces to it. It's very powerful. And Deno uses TSX files very explicitly, but there aren't a lot of help files or examples out there. Most of the stuff shows you how to use this in other environments. So I'd love to see this project grow. But this is what we have right now. It's a good way to create code that runs on the client and the server, and it's a good starting point, a template for you.